Japan by River Cruise is only possible thanks to the generosity of our sponsors. Here's a message from one of them.
The Tokyo-based Steamboat of Doom escape room experiences. This River Cruise escape room is a 90-minute interactive steampunk adventure in which you and your friends must put your heads together to solve a series of riddles and puzzles aboard the ship to escape the clutches of the evil Coal Baron. Escaping will require all of your wit, and it does not count if you just jump off the boat, so please stop doing that. It's not as clever as you think it is, and the company is having some liability issues with other vessels that use the waterway. This has been a message from our sponsor, Steamboat of Doom. Welcome back to Japan by River Cruise. It's been about 2 months since we finished up our debut season at the very logical and natural number of 19 episodes, and now we're back with the long-awaited premiere of season number 2, which is a thing that we had totally planned to do from the beginning, and I think we were pretty clear in communicating those intentions the entire time. As always, I'm Bobby calling in from Fukuoka.
And here with the bumper 20th episode, co-hosting duty, it's me, Ollie Horn.
That's right. On today's show, last year it was tapioca, but what's the latest Chinese trend that's spreading like an infectious disease in Japan? It's an infectious disease. Also, the first Japanese chef working in France to be awarded 3 Michelin stars is here in the list of things that we'll be talking about. And Ollie's got your River Cruise recommendation, yeah, Ollie?
Yes, this week's recommendation is a special cruise that Japan is offering tourists from China. It's a free tour that sails from the Kobe Port Tower around the Kansai Bay, and it lasts as long as the World Health Organization's recommended 2 to 3 week incubation period. More information on that later.
Also, did you know that some of Japan's most popular onsen are right alongside rivers? We'll tell you which River Cruise boats are tall enough for you to catch a glimpse of people in the bath. But first, Soap Talk.
Bobby, for listeners who have forgotten why we call this segment Soap Talk, should we cast our minds back to episode 1 of this illustrious podcast and explain the difference between... let me see if I can get the difference right. Seken banashi is small talk, and seken banashi is soap talk.
You are very close. You've gotten close to it. I think you're still hitting the glottal stop a little bit on seken banashi.
Yep. Yeah.
But seken banashi is small talk. Ali tends to say seken banashi, which means soap talk. So first soap talk of the new season. What you got, Ollie?
I have, obviously a wealth of experiences in the last 2 months. I suppose why don't I explain what happened the week which we first postponed the recording of episode 20, was...
Are we going to own up to actually just not doing it for...
Yeah, it's one of these things we just didn't do it at all. And then the next week we were like, okay, well, let's try again. And then we didn't do it. And then we were like, right, now let's make this a thing and not do it for long enough that it seems plausible that we had, some kind of real kind of...
Which one of us was like, let's not do this? Which one made it a thing that we weren't doing it?
Yeah, I did. I said, we've got to do it. We've got to take a break for long enough that it seems that we're important. If you take a break for like 2 weeks, it seems like we just can't keep to a schedule.
And that was after the 3 weeks in a row that we scheduled the recording, and then you showed up like 3 hours late.
Yes, I showed up 3 hours late, and for a live recording, that makes it really difficult.
Yeah.
But the original reason why I couldn't show up was I managed to get hospitalized from doing a session of beginner's gentle yoga.
Right.
Now, basically, I joined this class, and I was the only person in the class. It was almost like a private session, and I just turned my back just very moderately, and I was in such like chronic pain the next day. Couldn't walk, couldn't lift my left leg higher than like an inch off the ground.
Yeah.
And then terrible. Then I had like a weekend of work. I was emceeing this thing. I thought, right, I'm going to sort this out with a massage the next day. So I went to this masseuse and didn't tell her my problems. Because she never really asked, and couldn't get up off the massage chair, like bed after. Couldn't put my own socks on. Disaster. And I think I'm probably going to be talking about this in my next show. But the thing which struck me as most interesting about the experience was fate meant that my friend who I was due to go and visit because he just had a baby said, "Oh, did you know that my mother-in-law is a postnatal masseuse? So why don't you come round? She'll see if she can sort you out."
You went to a postnatal masseuse.
Went to postnatal masseuse, and what she did was she basically stood on my back, and she's Muslim, which I mentioned because it's things like this that I think do create religious conversions. Because she said some stuff in Arabic, and then she stood on my back, and then I could walk again. And I was like, right, okay, well, Jesus might exist, or the Prophet Muhammad, or whatever it is they care about. And then the next day I woke up and I was kind of back to normal, and then I went round to her house and paid her money this time and found out that she's less a masseuse, more a spiritual healer. And so I now have a spiritual healer. And most of the session was spent me wearing a robe for no reason that she explained, and counting out peppercorns. We counted out 6 black peppercorns, 6 white peppercorns, and that was something to do with warning off some evil spirits that had been put into me with this masseuse. She got some turmeric out, and I went, "Oh, that's good for inflammation." She went, "You won't be consuming this." She just got a pin, put that in the turmeric, did some kind of Arabic spell involving my mum, and I'm not sure. Well, I'm not sure whether we got the ratio of peppercorns wrong or something, but it didn't. None of it worked.
So throwing out your back, I'm understanding why you missed like the first week or two, and then hearing what you did to treat it, I'm understanding why you missed the other month and a half.
I mean, and like things got from bad to worse because then I had to take a flight, and I couldn't get off the chair after. It was like the handles in the back of cars, right?
Yeah.
I used that for the first time in my life.
What do you call those in the UK?
What, the handles in the back of cars?
Yeah.
I don't know. Is there a word?
We always called them the oh shit handles.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. What are you doing? What's going on?
I'm just plugging my laptop in. I realized that this podcast episode might last for just 15 minutes unless I plug a laptop. So look, I mean, very, very long story short, managed to, and then then I went to go and see a physiotherapist, and then he recommended I tried some sports. So I tried skiing for the first time, then I broke a rib, and so like, all in all, I've not managed to make myself better, but I'll be dipping into these stories, I'm sure, week on week, because this is basically forming the I think this is forming the through line for my next comedy hour.
Your next so British style story frame, storytelling structure, lots of stand-up jokes, also has a message, right?
Yeah, and I think the message is right that. And this is something which I'm still really early in thinking about, but I think as we grow, like as when we're young, there are certain things that we don't do because we associate those things with people that we don't like, right? Or kind of. So I know a lot of people in school they never did maths, right? Because they were like, "Oh, maths is for the geeky kids. It's cool if I don't do maths." Then they reach their mid-20s and they find out actually they're quite good at maths, right? They just avoided it because they didn't want to associate themselves with being a good mathematician. A lot of people are like that with sports. Some people are like that with, I don't know, going clubbing, or I think everyone has something.
That this is not a thing for me. This is not a thing that people like me do, and so you avoid it. Yeah,
and so I avoided most sport because that's what the bullies in school did, and I was like, I wouldn't want, and I think what happens as you grow up is you start to become maybe less cynical about trying new things because I don't know, you're more sure of your own identity. You realize more and more that you have these biases, and so I think it all started with me trying yoga for the first time, and I think I've now done yoga 3 times, and all 3 times have been an absolute disaster. First time I tried it, it was an outdoor yoga session in San Francisco, and I paid, I think it was like $40 or $45, like a crazy amount of money, to join they call it an outdoor gym, right? What they mean by an outdoor gym is a park, right? They've just rebranded a park for $45. And it started with us doing a lap around the park. And I felt so bad because it was all these like quite rich people, kind of startup-y people, and me there kind of bringing up the rear. And as we ran around one of the blocks, we were waking up a load of homeless people who were sleeping on the streets. And I was like, oh God, we are the worst, right? This is just awful. This is obviously a metaphor for something. And I kind of got the measure of America, or I realized quite how different Americans are to British people when I was the last person in the group, and I was the one which kind of made eye contact with this guy just as he wearily opened his eyes and worked out what was going on. And rather than get really cross at me and shout, he saw that I was like out of breath and panting, and he went, "Come on, buddy, you got this!" And like he encouraged me, and then went back to sleep. And then, so I did this outdoor yoga session, and the instructor came up to me after, and she was like, "Well, I see this was your first time." I was like, "I never told you that." And she said, "Do you have any questions for me?" I said, "Yeah, what's downward dog?" You kept making us do downward dog. I didn't know what that was. And she said with complete sincerity, in a very positive way, "You were doing your downward dog, and that was brilliant." And so that was the first time I tried it. Second time I tried it, I was in Nepal. I nearly shat myself. And then this third time I tried it was at this beginner's gentle yoga session, which ended up being a private session. And I injured myself to the extent that I had to get in and out of a car in the same way my elderly grandparents do for a good 6 weeks.
I have had the experience of throwing out my back. I don't think I actually went as far as to slip a disc in my spinal cord, but I've thrown out my back, and it's very similar. Do you know what they call it in Japanese, by the way? When you what we in American English call throwing out your back?
No.
Gikkuri goshi.
Bikkuri?
Gikkuri.
Oh, gikkuri.
Like bikkuri, surprise, but with a gi. Gikkuri goshi. And koshi is your hips. And so again, there's that like weird area that some of what we identify as back and lower back, the Japanese people use the word for hips. But it's the same thing. Like you can't stand upright. Like certain positions is excruciatingly painful.
It's awful. It's bad. And like it's I suppose you grow up thinking that you're invincible and feeling that anything that happens to your body will instantly recover. And then I don't know, like the first time I noticed that my body was, I can affect my body in ways that will never change. I cut my finger when I was studying in Paris with a glass, and that cut is still on my hand. And I kind of, you never realize, you do stuff to your body that, lasts forever.
Especially as you get older. Talking about aging, you identified that idea of, trying out things or feeling more liberated or more able to try out things that you didn't think were for people like you as you get older. It's interesting that you identify that as a function of getting older. For me, a lot of that came from like leaving my environment, like moving to Japan. I was never a guy who would sing in front of people or dance in front of people or do anything that I felt like might remotely embarrass myself. And so I held back from doing a lot of those kinds of things because I felt like I was in this environment where everybody knew me. It wasn't so much my perception of myself, but how I perceived that others were perceiving me. And I think leaving the environment that you're used to and going to some place where nobody knows you was very liberating in a way that I got to realize that, singing and dancing are fun. It don't matter if you're good at them or not. They're still fun.
Yeah, and I think this happens to a lot of people who go abroad for the first time, because just like when you start a new high school or start a college, you get a chance to reinvent yourself. And I think that chance to reinvent yourself, people think that it's because they're surrounded by a load of new people.
Yeah.
All of a sudden they can trick them with a new identity, right? These people have never met me before. They're now going to know me as a goth. Or these people have never met me before. They can know me as someone that regularly goes to the gym. Whereas before, my friends, but before my friendship group was a kind of friendship group that would associate me with someone that doesn't do this kind of thing. Right. Therefore, they would tease me. But actually, I would say that change of circumstances, right, moving to a new country, it's one way of doing it. But I think you're able to create that yourself if you want to. Like, I don't think you have to displace yourself to do so. It just makes it a lot easier for the reasons that you mentioned. That people
I might have discovered that anyway had I not moved to Japan, but moving to Japan was definitely an accelerant. It helped with that a lot.
So, something else that I've noticed about people that live abroad, particularly those who live in countries where they don't speak that country's language and they end up mixing with people from their own country, is the range of hobbies available to you is smaller, right? That is to say, the things which you would habitually do in your home country might not even be available in your host country. So like if you want to hang around, so like take Fukuoka for example, right? The easiest way to hang around with other foreigners is in bars or doing something like a board game meetup, right? And that might not be something that you'd intuitively want to do in your home country, but because that's what everyone does, that's what you end up doing. And so I know people that have moved to Japan and got really into board games as a result of it. Likewise, actually, stand-up comedy. I've got this theory about stand-up comedy in Asia, that stand-up comedy audiences in Asia, the expat audiences are harder to play to than the local audiences. And people are often surprised when I say this, right? Because they're like, shouldn't it be easier to play to people from your own country than play to people from a foreign country? But I think what makes a good audience is not their level of English or whether they're from the same country as you, but their comedy literacy. And what you find, you go to a country like, I don't know, Myanmar or something, right? And the locals in the audience, they're there because they're like super into comedy, right? They've watched loads of it on YouTube. They know stand up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because if you think about the 50 or so self-selecting local people that go and watch stand-up comedy, it's because they're super into, it's because they're super into comedy. Whereas the expat audiences, those the foreigners in that country, often will do so because it's English entertainment, and that's what all the other expats are doing. So what you'll find is, I often ask people, is this the first time you've seen live stand-up comedy? And often expats, like American people, European people in Hong Kong, in Singapore, whatever, the first time they've ever gone to a comedy club is abroad, because that's the available entertainment for them.
I hadn't thought about that, but that is true. In Tokyo shows, a lot of times you get a lot of Western hands when you say, is it your first time at a live comedy show? I think there's probably a lot more natural exposure to stand-up comedy on TV and things like that. But yeah, now that you mention it, in terms of going out and seeking entertainment that feels more like at home, stand-up comedy is an option that people might take here just because it's in English, just because it's something that other foreigners are going to be doing.
And because, we spend a lot of our lives thinking about stand-up comedy and being immersed in the world, we forget that most people in the US haven't stepped foot into a comedy club, a live comedy club.
Yeah. I had no idea that like board game meetups were a thing in Fukuoka, but I'm actually pretty sure that one of the Bryans was stoked to hear you mention that.
Oh, good. Well, if it helps, Brian, I have the same degree of respect for board games as I do for improv comedy. Bobby, how have you spent the last 2 months?
Well, I think we had a lot of like dropped threads at the end of we had some cliffhangers at the end of season 1 there. I was getting ready.
And we've been frankly inundated with messages about them.
Yeah. We actually do. We have one message from a Brian in Fukuoka named Matthias. I'm gonna learn this one of these days. But he says, "Where are the recommendations? Feeling quite stranded without them." Anyway, my soap talk. So I was getting ready for the company party that I was invited to. They invited me to do a 20 to 25 minute block of Japanese stand-up comedy style for a party. You remember this?
I do remember this, and we had a discussion about whether this was a terrible idea or just a bad idea.
Yeah, one of the reasons that we thought it was going to be so bad was because Japanese comedians who do these jobs bomb at them, because the room is not set up for a comedy show. It's very spread out. They are not there to see a comedy show. They're there to drink. They're talking. There's a lot going on in the room. They don't really care about you, and so they don't pay attention. And comedy doesn't work if people don't pay attention, and if there's so much stuff going on in the room. So I got there on the night. That makes it hard, even before you factor in the fact that they wanted me to do Western style stand-up comedy for a Japanese audience. But I got there on the actual night, and it was a group called the Esron Kai from around Kyushu. And I don't know, Kai means like an organization or an association. Esron is the name of their company. I'm not sure what it means. But there were 40 people at the party. 40, right?
Oh, that's hard.
Which is great for like a small comedy room, but at one of these parties, it's 8 people at each of 5 tables, right?
Oh, and let me guess, these were round tables spread out across a room.
Yeah.
They were some people with backs to you,
stage, which was nice. But yeah, a lot of people with their backs to me.
Are you using artistic license with the word stage? Was it an actual raised stage with a mic?
No, it had an actual raised stage. It was inside this little mini banquet room, but they'd put up a raised stage. Better than some of the stages we've done.
Yeah, Oh man, I mean,
No crate.
I think
No crate.
I think I spoke about it on one of the podcasts. At one of the stages, I was given an option in a gig.
And when you say
which
one
was
of the podcasts, you mean your food podcast, you mean this podcast, or you mean rugby? We love rugby.
Oh yeah, if it's any consolation to fans of this podcast, my in the intervening 2 months, my other podcast has is also, you know, got the audio equivalent of tumbleweeds coming out of it. We've got so, you know, basically I've neglected a lot of things, not just my health. But you know, on the note of bad stages, I was given a choice by the promoter of, well, you can either stand on the table that the table dancers use, right, which is like a very, very raised table, the podium dancers use, I should say. You can stand on the floor where the audience are, or you can stand on one of the steps leading up to the podium. And and so and also, and then of course he went, it's a radio mic, so it should, so you know, it should reach anywhere. And of course, you know, radio mics are just the worst thing in the world. And so I thought that gave me a bit of dignity, that I had the agency to decide, yes, I'll go for the third step. I'll stand on the. Anyway, so you got a proper stage, and let's set the scene. 40 people. Are they dressed in? Are they like dressed in suits? Are they letting their hair down?
They finished like a day of conferences, and these are not like the people from the entire company. These are the heads of the different branches all around Kyushu. So the age range of these
men.
Of these men. Yes, it was. Let's look at the gender demographics. Gender demographics was 98% male.
There was one woman there.
There was one woman there. Literally, there was one woman, and the rest were men. And the age range, the youngest person was 42, and the oldest was 73, and the average was probably like 60 something. So I don't know whose idea it was to book this kind of entertainment for this room. So I walked in, I saw the room, and I went, I'm gonna bomb. And I got up and I just threw myself into it anyway, knowing I was gonna bomb. And I had forgotten about the gaijin factor, which is, you know, they never pay attention at these things, but when it's a foreigner up there, there's this element where they're like, I wonder what this dude is gonna say.
Yeah, it's like if on that stage, rather than their normal MC, like a parrot just was dragging a juggling club up to the stage. At the very least, you stop what you're doing.
It could have been anything. You'd be like,
can they juggle?
What's gonna happen now?
Yeah.
What is? How will this develop? And so they paid attention. And I'll say 30% of the jokes hit, and 30% of the jokes did not hit at all. And the rest, because of the whole thing where stand-up in the West is more of a thinking game, they have what's called kangae ochi, which is, you know, the thinking punchline. You know, the audience has to connect some dots for themselves in order to get the joke. And that's not a common thing in Japan, but that doesn't mean that nobody can do it. So anytime I had a joke that I know is like a joke that works really well in English, but is a kangae ochi in Japanese, there were 3 people in the room who cracked up.
The fans.
Yeah. And like they put it together themselves. They were quick enough to figure out what was the funny thing. And everybody else, not because they're not quick, but because they're not used to that mode of comedy.
They're not bothering.
They kind of went like, I don't understand, but I see that someone did. And so he's done something interesting.
Yeah.
And so
how glad are we of those 3 people? Imagine if they hadn't turned up.
Oh man, they saved me. And then the other thing was, because the nature of stand-up comedy is so different from Japanese comedy that they're used to, they were in stitches in places that were not jokes. So the 30% that didn't hit, or like the 40% that like didn't hit for most of the room, they would start laughing during the setups. Like they're from all over Kyushu, and I would be like, so anybody here from Nagasaki? And a table raised their hands, and I said, oh, I got stopped for a traffic violation in Nagasaki. And they cracked up. And like that's the beginning of the story. That's a story you were there for. Do you remember when we did the show in Nagasaki? And
I do. I remember
pulling out of a parking lot, and they were like, the direction that you're pulling out is a one-way street. And so,
I seem to remember it was just after a discussion of us going down for this tour show and working out if we just about made some money, and then the police officer making sure that with your fine, definitely didn't make money.
So I have a small little story that has a couple of jokes in there, but like the premise is that I was stopped for a traffic violation in Nagasaki.
The guy was a complete dick, wasn't he? You really had just pulled out of a parking space. It wasn't even like you went down the street.
Less than 10 meters. Like
and then when all this nonsense was over, you were like, "Can you tell me how to get out?" Right?
Yeah. So it was not a one-way street when we came in. It was only a one-way street after a certain hour at night.
Time. Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then you were like, "Can you tell me how to get out?" And he was like, "To be honest, I'm not really sure, mate." You'll have to...
They pulled out a map and they were like, "Okay, go down this way and take a right." And then one of the other cops would be like, "Oh no, that one's one way too right now." And like they didn't even know. but they were laughing at that. I have that joke about my wife hates the noise I make when I come, which like you do that joke in English and everybody gets real quiet right then. Like they get real quiet and then you hit them with the punchline and then they crack up. And this one I was like, my wife hates the noise I make when I come, and the room burst into laughter. They were like, I can't believe he just said that. And
that's not a very corporate friendly gag anyway, is it?
Well, I checked beforehand. I was like, can I do these kinds of jokes? And they were like, do everything that you want. Do anything that you want. And
wow.
I was like, okay. Yeah, so that was good. I had the roast battle.
Sorry, just before we move on from this, did you do any crowd work?
Very little. Very little. I talked to people a handful of times, and anytime a joke didn't work, I would use that instead of just. I mean, as you do, like you go, imano ga ochi datta. Just like leaning into the suberi, leaning into the bombing. But so overall they were happy and they were like, yeah, no, you again, because of that foreign factor that everybody was paying attention, they were like, that in itself, I mean, made it a success, and we could definitely do this again for other events.
That car crash was beautiful.
Everyone was looking at it.
Okay, so the roast battle. More showing off.
I've had 2 roast battles. I lost to Shanghai. Tokyo versus Shanghai. Did not win that one. It was very close. Came down to the last joke. My last joke was not as funny as I thought it was. I got scared. I had something I wanted to do that was risky, and I backed out. And I went with a joke that I knew was weaker, just about how white he was, which is not the most effective thing because we were both really white. But I wanted, so the guy, Eric Alexander, very, very funny comedian from Shanghai, actually went on to win the Bangkok Comedy Festival this year.
Oh, okay.
But so he's a rapper. He's in a rap unit called Covert Props, which was one of the jokes. It was, his unit is called Covert Props, which is an ironic name because he's an obvious tool. But I actually wrote a verse that I thought, if I get my courage in me, I'm gonna close with it. But I quit drinking. Remember how I quit drinking?
Yeah, I remember that.
When apparently taking risks is a lot more difficult when you're sober.
Are you back on the booze now?
I am not. I'm not.
Oh,
yeah.
All right.
Well, mate. But no, he was really, really good. One of my favorite jokes of his was about my name. It was a white guy in Asia calling himself Bobby Judo. Bobby Judo sounds like something your racist grandfather calls all Asian people. Like this used to be a really nice neighborhood till all the Bobby Judos moved in.
That's nice.
Yeah, but he had a really great stage presence and just kind of kept like bringing it. And I think some of the jokes didn't hit as hard. He referenced like Zoolander a bunch because I have like that Derek Zoolander blue steel face. But a lot of the jokes he would hit really hard with it and then drag them out until they went on a little bit too long and the audience started to get tired of it. But
just for the benefit of the listener, by the way, this is a podcast. You can't see Bobby. Bobby's very good looking.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you could probably hear that.
What do I sound? What do I sound like? Email in to japanbyrivercruise.com.
Let us know how you imagine Ollie looks. But so,
there's a dating app, by the way, that now does that. Like, you just record a voice message, and then the more you listen to the voice, you start to see that person's face reveal.
Huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, so that was cool. It was a really good battle, a really fun show. But I kind of felt like I got outboxed in terms of his onstage persona. He was very, very active in a very likable way, and had this kind of like I could see it coming from his rap background. He had kind of like this swagger and this rhythm on stage that I felt worked really, really well for him. So I've been copying that.
I've been copying that, brother.
Yeah. So since then, I think I've tried to be more conscious of my movement and stuff on stage. And I'm going to put up a video soon of the battle, Your Hood's a Joke, where I represented Fukuoka against Tokyo. And I won that one. And I think you'll see there's a lot more gesturing, a lot more moving, and a lot more swag.
Yeah.
And I think that helps a lot.
Anyone listening to this that is thinking of getting into stand-up comedy, or is doing their first mics, thinking about how you stand and how your body moves is so important. Everyone talks about you got to write great jokes, but people forget that people are watching you on stage, and how you look so affects how your jokes are received.
Yeah.
I definitely think I've been doing better on stage ever since I thought about my posture.
Yeah.
Having a posture that suits the way you speak.
Well, that's
the clothes that you wear as well.
One of the reasons that I watch my stand-up videos back, I mean, it's mostly to masturbate to, but the other reasons, I tend to like watch and take notes on my habits and the things that I do. Like I noticed a long time ago watching the videos back that I would say a punchline and then move the mic away from my face. Like I was punctuating. Yep. I was like, that's my laugh. And I realized how probably if you saw me once, you might not notice, but I realized it's not a good look. And then I
think I gave you this advice.
Yeah,
I gave you the advice that watch a pro act, right?
Yeah.
What happens is they deliver a line, and whatever emotion that line has in it stays for the duration of that laugh. So they get much longer and much bigger laughs, right?
Yeah.
So you were shocked to see your sister just walked in, and whatever that shocked face is, or that shocked state, that stays for the duration that the audience are laughing, because they're still in that moment, so you should still be too.
Yeah. That's another thing I noticed watching footage back is speed. Like as the performer, you tend to be on to the next thing before the audience is done.
Yeah.
And that also shortens your laugh.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, open micers, like tragically sabotage their own laughs a lot of the time, I think.
Yeah.
Because they, they don't allow the material to the space that it needs.
Yeah. Your crew in Stand Up Fukuoka, Comedy Fukuoka, put on a one-liner show the other night.
I know. I heard it went very well.
Yeah, it went very well. It was 8 comics. They each did 2 sets of 10 one-liner jokes each, and I think the entire show finished in less than an hour. It was crazy.
Yeah. Well, it was my suggestion. That format was my suggestion, because when I heard that they were mooting the idea of doing a one-liner show, I thought this could be a disaster.
Yeah.
And so the way that you mitigate one-liner shows being insufferable is it's like strict limits on not time, but how many jokes people do, and also finding a way to break the evening up. So I think you did it in 2 halves in the end, didn't you?
Yeah. And still less than an hour. And I think it was interesting because Comedy Fukuoka shows tend to be like 8 performers and then 2 audience members. So you've got like a total of 9 in the audience at any given time.
Please don't besmirch my comedy club.
Besmirch? Is besmirch a word?
Yeah, it is now.
Okay.
It's what it's when Bobby belittles me with some truth, which I don't like.
No, I mean, the open mic.
No, the open mic. The open
tend to
mic.
be. I mean, but most open mics in most places do, right? They tend to be you're performing for other people who want to go up.
Yeah, occasionally we get lucky, but you're right.
Yeah.
But this apparently was quite good attendance too.
Yeah, it was very well attended, and everybody was really, really kind. Stephen did a great job emceeing and getting everyone to be a generous audience, to the point where they did this thing where he gave out a topic. It's just randomly assigned topic that you had to write a new joke about, and I got the topic elephant memory. And so I came up with this joke that is not like a hilarious ha 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 ha, but I think it's very clever. And the joke is, elephants are resentful little bitches. They never forget, which is probably why people don't talk about them when they're in the room.
Very good.
It's
very funny.
Yeah, it's clever as I see what you did there. And everybody cracked up when I said they never forget.
Yeah.
Because they were like, okay. And they were used to that one-liner format of like, this is where a punchline is supposed to come. He probably thinks that was a punchline. Let's give it to him.
Let's get this shit over with. The quicker we laugh, the quicker we can all go home.
Yeah.
No, I'm really pleased that went well. And what's interesting is a lot of the current crop of open micers, they all seem to gravitate towards writing one-liners, and so I think it's great. I'm really pleased. We've got anyone listening to this podcast in Fukuoka should know that Comedy Fukuoka is a comedy club which we set up back in 2014, and we used to have quarterly visiting headliner shows where, at great personal expense and personal capital, social capital, I should say, I would bring in a guest headliner, and we would oscillate between losing loads of money and losing some money, and then make that shortfall up with poorly attended open mics. We have 2 shows coming up before the summer, hopefully, with some very worthwhile names. So anyone that's in Fukuoka that wants to check out live stand-up comedy, go to comedyfukuoka.com, like the Facebook page. That's where you'll get tickets for these events first. And let me tell you, I'm very proud of the comedy club that we've created. The venue that we do it at cares. It's always a good night out, and when we get visiting acts, they always bring it, because the audiences generally, and we've had 1 or 2 bad eggs, but generally the audiences are some of the best comedy audiences that these visiting acts perform to, because everyone's so damn grateful that they've ventured all the way down to Kyushu, and really they should. There's better things they should be doing with their time. To be fair to James Acaster, he did make that judgment call.
Cool. Should we go ahead and get into the news?
Bobby Judo, what's in the news this week?
Well, you wanted to talk about the coronavirus.
Yes. So I heard from an American friend that American people were polled, and a surprising number of people think that it's to do with the beer.
Yep.
So the thing that I find fascinating about this virus is that as when we're recording this, which is Thursday, so that this episode's going to go out tomorrow on Friday.
Can I just break in real quick, because I just want to confirm something? Because we were talking about what news stories we should do, and you said I want to do the coronavirus one because I have a joke about the coronavirus. Was that it? The Americans were polled, and it's about the beer. Was that it?
No.
Was that the joke?
No.
Okay, thank God, man. Because that's right. I was like, I'm okay. I'm happy to see that you have not stopped your low-hanging fruit tendencies over the hiatus. But that's that's the first thing that everybody said about that. I mean, that's like take number 1.
Oh no, that wasn't the joke. And I'm now I understand your reaction, which was you were like that wasn't a joke. That was, I heard that was an actual thing, right? That wasn't me presenting a.
Okay.
Well, now I understand why your reaction. You were looking at me as if to go, Matt, you've let yourself down here. This is you're going.
I think we spent too much time talking about open mics.
But yeah, so what I find really funny about this is the latest like flight of people that came into Japan from China,
the charter flight.
to
It was a specific charter flight. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they delayed it a couple times.
Apparently, you're allowed to just opt out of the health screening, and 2 Japanese guys were like, "No, thank you," and then they were found to be infected and had infected other people. Mental, makes no sense at all.
Really?
And to think how difficult. Yeah. This is news as of like 2 hours ago.
So I haven't been following this because I tend to ignore these kind of like. So when they first hit the news, these kind of like outbreaks, I tend to look into how serious they actually seem. And this one, the numbers on it are like not. I mean, it's basically a flu. I mean, it's not. The mortality rate is not that high, considering the fact that most people probably don't get symptoms severe enough to go to the hospital with it. And it just seems like one of those like crazy media things that they're trying to make a big deal out of. But I did see headlines pop up, and the American headlines were like, they're chartering American flights to get people out of China, and they're quarantining the people when they come home. So,
as you should do.
Yeah.
I mean, let's not downplay the scale of this. Like Wuhan is on lockdown, and there have been unfortunate fatalities, and there's been some of the social media footage that's come out of China has shown some of the worst parts of human behavior come to the fold. Like, let me put it this way:
that's the panic that comes from the media making a huge thing out of. And again, I admittedly have not been reading all of the stories, but like it's got a mortality rate that's comparable to the flu or less than the flu, and it's
sure.
Not that like, it shouldn't be handled, not that there shouldn't be.
No, but isn't the point that we have we do have vaccinations for the flu, but we don't have vaccinations for this? And so there was one video, for example, of someone in a hospital who wasn't. I don't remember exactly what it was, but she wasn't given a mask or she wasn't given treatment, and the nurse who was only trying to help her said, "This is all I can do to help you," and fucking hell. I'm just for the benefit of the listener, the way that we record this is we do so online with some software that allows us to see each other. Bobby, for a brief moment, covered his webcam with his hand so he could pick his nose. But what he failed to do was stop picking his nose before he removed his hand from the webcam. So what I saw while I was trying to describe to you, dear listener, Brian, while I was trying to describe this poor Chinese nurse who was the victim of a crime, what I saw was my screen just went pink, right? Bobby's hand pink. So now I'm interested. Now I'm looking at the screen, and then almost like some kind of movie crossfade, the pink then dissipates into Bobby removing his finger from his nose.
Well, it was technically out. I mean, it was out. I think you just reduced.
I did the backwards reasoning. Anyway, let me make it clear. You might just be listening to this in podcast form, but we're real humans here. Bobby's picking his nose, and I'm topless. So this video just showed this nurse getting spat on by the patient. She was like, "Well, if I'm infected, you're infected too," which wasn't a very pleasant thing to do. Also, a tourist, Chinese lady, took a load of medicine so she wouldn't be spotted. Because there's like those infrared cameras at the airport to check if you're unwell. Yeah. She was like, "I took enough medicine that I foiled the cameras." Blah 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 blah. And yeah, I mean, and someone on Twitter today in Japan said that he told the I'm translating this on the fly, but he basically said he told the authorities at the airport, "I've just come back from China, and I've got flu-like symptoms," I guess is the way kaze no yoni. Yeah, so like I've got flu-like symptoms, and the airport were like, "Yeah, fine. I mean, go to the doctor if you want to." So it just seems to be handled.
They don't have
atrociously.
The right setup and the right precautions for it.
Yeah. But hopefully everyone listening to this is well. Apparently, the main thing you can do to prevent yourself from getting ill is to not touch your face. Apparently, the biggest return on investment in times like this is to not wear a mask so much as just not touching your face,
which is really hard to do. I think you don't
Yeah.
realize how often you touch your face. We do standard. My house is an tearai and ugai house. So every time we come back in from the outside, we wash our hands and gargle. And when people are coughing, I think the girls wear like masks to school when they're sick.
Why'd you gargle?
Gargling, because apparently, I think it's a general hygiene thing, but also apparently like you can have bacteria in your mouth that hasn't yet infected you, and you can get rid of it. Cool.
Is that gargling?
Yes, that's gargling.
Thank you. Should we have a look at the other news story? This is a much nicer story.
Yeah. Kei Kobayashi is the first Japanese chef working in France to get 3 Michelin stars, which is the highest honor for Michelin, right?
Yeah. You know the history of the Michelin Guide, right? You know what the stars used to represent?
No.
So Michelin is a tire company, and they produced, and then their business model was, how do we sell more tires? Obviously, you can't sell tires to people that you've already sold tires to. So instead, what they did was to encourage people to use their cars more, so the tires would wear out quicker, and they'd be able to sell more tires.
Yeah.
So that's why they produced this guide, and the stars simply meant 1 star to 3 stars meant the distance, the distance deviation from your route that we would recommend. So, for example, a 1-star restaurant historically was, this restaurant's worth going to if it's on the way, right? 2 stars means it's worth taking a diversion, and 3 stars means it's worth making a special trip to this restaurant.
Oh wow!
Obviously, that's changed since.
But that was the origin of that there.
Yeah, well, apparently so. I mean, that might be complete bollocks. But that's not stopping me from wasting your time explaining it, is it?
Nah. So apparently, they're saying that French cuisine has started to lose a little bit of prestige in the world.
Or as the French would call it, prestige.
Yes, exactly. They say their popularity is waning, and they're seeing more popularity of foreign cuisines. And so there's been more and more recent years foreign chefs who are working and have restaurants in France getting more Michelin stars. So the most recent announcement had 2 Japanese chefs who won 2 stars for their restaurants, and then one, the first ever Japanese chef to win 3 Michelin stars in France. And this is what they let's see what they like about him. He says he doesn't like his cooking categorized as either French or Japanese. It's just the best. And the Michelin Guide describes him as a virtuoso of flavors, and his cooking is both delicate and memorable. It's very simple. Every dish that Kei turns the rigor of his attention to, is called on to become a signature one.
His signature dish, my signature dish podcast, available in the iTunes store. Something that was told to me in confidence by someone who has a Michelin star. I was emceeing this thing in London, and what they said was the trick with Michelin. So Michelin has like a very small number of inspectors.
Yeah.
And apparently there's kind of an open industry secret that the way to get a Michelin star is to move away from traditional French food, because that field has been so thoroughly plowed. Like, these inspectors have seen it all.
Yeah.
That's why it's easier, for example, to get a Michelin star for, say, a chicken rice stall in Singapore, because they claim that the Western mindset of the inspectors is more easily impressed by a cuisine that isn't this traditional French standard.
Yeah.
And so this sounds like I'm just trying to belittle this poor guy's achievements. But it's I guess it's a testament to France that they take on this fusion cuisine.
Well, not all of the, this is a quote again, French gastronomes were as convinced of his genius. An influential culinary website said his cooking lacked coherence and emotion. And this is really interesting because what they praised him for...
He lacks emotion. Yeah, come on.
What they praised him for was the precision of his cooking and the way he made relatively simple dishes like gnocchi, truffle, bologna ham, and Parmesan cheese extraordinary. And so I think one of the big differences that Japanese culinary world draws between Japanese cooking and Western cooking is that Western cooking is about coherence. It's about cohesion. It's about taking a bunch of different things and turning them into one thing. Whereas Japanese cooking is about making very simple things that focus on like the one flavor of the ingredient.
Yeah.
Which is why, a Japanese traditional cuisine, you have so many dishes or so much variety, but each thing is a very simple flavor.
Right. And that's why I suppose in Japanese food it's very common on your tray to have like 7 or 8 different bowls, and each of those bowls will have a very different flavor profile. But what nonsense to say that his cooking lacks emotion, right? It's a stupid thing to say. I mean, maybe depressed is an emotion.
Yeah.
You just I'm calling it in today. I'm not just going to serve you some
Well, do
truffles.
you think there's an element of racism there, that European passion versus Asian coldness?
Who's to say that Asians can't be passionate?
Fair enough. This
About
is
math.
something that I
That's a terrible joke.
I didn't actually hear what you said.
I said, and I'm now regretting it. Who says that Asians can't be passionate about maths? It was a low hanging racist joke.
Oh man.
And I now regret saying it.
Well, so I think it's really interesting because it's cool to see that Japanese people are going abroad and being accepted and affecting change and influencing the cultures and the cuisines of the countries that they're in. But I also find it really interesting, especially in this case, to think about how the countries that they're in end up influencing the Japanese people themselves. Because this guy, Kei Kobayashi, is now the first ever 3-star Japanese chef in France. He's probably one of the most famous Japanese chefs in France right now. And there's also an extremely famous guy named Kobayashi in America, right? So in terms of how the country itself influences the Japanese person, Kei Kobayashi goes to France and becomes a Michelin star winning chef. And the Kobayashi who went to America is the hot dog eating champion.
It's nice. Well, I think there's a lot of similarities between French and Japanese culture. I suppose the difference is when you cheat on your wife in Japan, it's a secret. In France, it's an open secret. Both very proud nations. Proud of their language in their own respects.
Yeah.
And both struggle impossibly to learn English and use pride in their language as a reason for why they just don't bother to learn English. But I'm one thing I will say, kind of the other side of this coin is how many excellent examples of Western food you can find in Japan. Like, I genuinely think, and this is after having been to Italy, one of the best pizzas I've ever had was in a restaurant in Nakameguro with a Japanese chef who went to Naples, learned how to make pizza for like 10 years, and came back and just said, that's all I'm going to do. And every day, all he does is make one type of pizza. And he's there at the bottom of his restaurant, making the same type of pizza day in, day out. And he's absolutely perfected it. And it's such a tired thing to say, but I do genuinely think it's true. There's something about the Japanese education system or culture or whatever it is that breeds a mentality that you can be proud in just having refined something, right? And just executing really, really well on one thing is something to be proud of.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I think it's interesting that, you tend to see people who dedicate themselves to those things as one, craftsmen, and two, unique in their pursuit of their unique passion. But I also know that there are like 5 or 6 Japanese guys in every city in Japan who spent 10 years in Naples learning how to make pizza. There are like 7 restaurants that I've been to. There's one that I could walk to from here, and it makes me wonder what the hell is going on in Naples. If you just showed up at like a pizza restaurant in Naples, are there going to be like 7 Japanese dudes in the kitchen? Like...
Yeah, all right, you guys again. Episode 20 is in the can. Thanks very much for listening. If you are listening to this, it means that you've listened to the full duration of this bumper long episode. We're very grateful. I'd like to invite you to recommend this podcast to a friend if you haven't done so already. If you are in Japan, living in Japan, used to live in Japan, have an interest in Japan, and you're not abreast of the river cruise industry news, then you're probably not enjoying it as much as you could be.
And if it's a friend who doesn't necessarily have the same passion for Japanese river cruises, it's okay to recommend it to them too, because after listening to it, they will develop one.
Yes, and that's certainly true for a lot of the Japanese men that went to Naples. You know, they went to Naples with no passion for pizza. At the moment they heard about it, passion for pizza.
Yeah.
Likewise, listen to one episode about Japanese river cruises, passion for Japanese river cruises. It all makes sense. Bobby, how can they get in touch?
You can reach us at japanbyrivercruise.com. Go ahead and send us a message. We'll look forward to reading it on air, no matter what it says.
Within reason. So back next week to the normal schedule, back to kind of 30-minute lengths. So that's the perfect length of time for your commute to your Eikaiwa, Brian. That's not about one specific person. That's just you guys. And so we'll see you next week. してます